Maverick News, the antivirus program for your mind. And now, the Freedom Reporters.
Well, you know what my nickname was when I was working in mainstream media?
Mr. Fancy Shirt?
No.
What, were you the slob of the office?
No, they called me Necktie because I
Oh.
always wore a tie.
I've never seen you wear a tie. Of course, you don't have to anymore.
That's right. I always wore kind of unusual ties.
Oh, you were the cool tie guy.
I would wear a tie with like something little different on it. Like I had a Bugs Bunny tie.
Of course.
But when you look at it on camera, it looks professional. But down at the bottom, it'd be like a little Bugs Bunny.
Oh, they couldn't see the Bugs Bunny on camera, huh?
Right. Or I'd have like with wine labels, right? But you really have to look at it closely. So they don't. I had a nickname, Necktie. But that was also because I was pretty stiff. I was pretty straight laced. I wasn't. But anyway, you don't need.
Are you ever going to show us like some highlights from your years at CTV? I would love to see that someday. Like if you pulled some old Walker tapes out of the archives.
Not
like never.
Ever. You're just going to make fun of my hair. I know.
Of course I will.
My mullet.
You probably had perfect mullet with a lot of hairspray.
Oh my! Working
I'd love to see
it, man. It screws with your mind. You know, when I first got into media, I don't know if you went through this or not.
I was never in television, always radio.
See, it was all about. When I first got in, I didn't feel like I looked old enough. So I would try to look older, so I'd look more credible, right? And then, and I wouldn't wear my glasses. I'm supposed to wear glasses. I rarely ever put them on anymore. But
I found another pair, an emergency pair of glasses.
But then I thought, that's going to hold me back if I have to wear glasses. And if you're in the studio, you get reflection off your lenses. And I didn't want to look like too much of a nerd. So
4 eyes.
I don't know. Right. Yeah. So I would always leave my glasses off. I was just way too hung up on the aesthetics of it, man, because they just screwing with my mind too much, about all of that crap. And it really, at the end of the day, it only matters what the story is and how well it's told and what the journalism is about. But,
you just summed up all the reasons I never wanted to be in television news because it was all about the aesthetics, how you looked, and not so much the news.
Yeah.
I miss the times when our news anchors, it didn't matter what they looked like. I mean, Chet Huntley was not an attractive man, but he was one of the greatest news anchors in American history.
Yeah.
Didn't used to matter what you look like, even in TV. And most of those guys came from radio. They'd started out at NBC radio before there was television.
Yeah. Yeah, different times back then too, but it was all about being a Ken doll back then, right? You go back to the 70s and the 80s, and you look at the way newsrooms were, especially local newsrooms or regional, and they would hire the guy with the very deep voice and put one hand over his ear, reading the news very, very seriously.
That's right.
Right.
Oh, come on, Rick. Show us some of your old tapes. Come on.
Not a chance.
How much do I have to pay you to see those?
Oh my goodness. I've been trying to purge around here. I got rid of a whole bunch of old audition tapes and things that I had here.
You threw them away?
Yeah.
Rick, that's history.
Yeah, I know, but at some point you have to let go.
Maybe I don't know. I'm kind of a pack rat. I can't throw anything away. Anything that I ever created, like a song I wrote, anything. If it's something I made, something I did, I save it, right? So I've got air checks from when I first started out in radio news from the Reagan administration. That's how old my ass is. I go back and listen to them or edit them or digitize them once in a while. Been kind of, making sure that those old tapes don't fall apart, right? And transferring them to digital. And I listened to, well, I sounded like this back then because I was really young and I had a high-pitched voice.
Yes, that's right.
And there I was talking about,
Yeah.
President Reagan and the Star Wars program and all of these stories that are 40 years old. And I just, God, I feel so old. Matter of fact, I was uploading some stuff the other night from when I was covering the 1988 presidential campaign and Joe Biden being the biggest flop and joke candidate of the race.
Right.
He was a punchline every morning on the morning show, right? I'd do the news and bring the election stuff in, and the host and I would banter about what a fool Joe Biden was.
And wasn't the thing that really was the final nail in his coffin that time around, wasn't it like a plagiarism thing?
It was that. It was two scandals. There was the plagiarism scandal where he'd been caught stealing from Bobby Kennedy's speech, and another, I think, a Irish politician. He was caught stealing from them, and he was caught faking his academic record. So he had double scandals.
That's right. That's right. Yes.
Just because he can't stop lying. I mean, Joe Biden's always been a pathological liar, and he still lies like a rug.
And he still found his way to the White House.
Isn't that something? Yeah. The guy that could never, win in any presidential contest that he ever entered, never even got past the first or second primary in his entire career.
Now he's there and he doesn't even know it because he's
right.
He made it and he doesn't even realize it.
Oh, Rick, that poll that I'm running about who's your presidential choice for 2024, I think Joe Biden is up to a whopping 2.5%, maybe 3%. He is so beloved. 81 million Americans voted for him. I mean, he's the best president ever.
You know what the mistake is that he made? He campaigned from his basement, and when he won, he came out. Right. And now look what's happened. He went from having the most votes
get back in the basement, Joe.
More support than any president ever to 2%.
2%. And Bobby Kennedy is running away with that poll. It's okay. You guys know the story. A couple of weeks back, I posted a poll on Twitter asking who will you vote for in 2024 if you've made up your mind yet. And they only give you 4 choices in a Twitter poll. So the choices were Biden, Trump, Bobby Kennedy, because they're the front runners, at least according to the polls. And then the 4th category was other or undecided. And a funny thing happened. My polls usually get 5,000-10,000 votes. That poll, Bobby Kennedy was winning it by a mile. He had like 48% to Trump's, I think, 28%. So he's leading Trump by almost 20 points. And they just stopped counting votes, right? We talked about it here on the show. Got to 918 votes. It was a 7-day poll. Voting was open for 5 more days. But it just stopped counting votes. People started sending me screenshots saying, I think I'm number 919, but when I go back and I refresh the page on the poll, my vote is gone. And it still says 918 votes. So it froze up and thousands more people voted over the next 5 days. But that vote counter never changed from 918 votes. So I thought, maybe Twitter just kind of was broken. Maybe we should just try this again. And I waited until after Bobby Kennedy officially entered the race this week, made his announcement. And I thought, okay, now that people have heard his speech, right? That big, long speech that we carried on the air, the 2-hour speech. I was just curious, what do people think about him now? So I ran the poll again after the speech. It's a 7-day poll. It's been up for 3 days. And it's got, let me pull it up here. Some 780 votes or so now. Let me see how we're doing. But get this, Kennedy is running away with this one. Now he's doubled his lead by 20 more points. He's at 58.4%. Holy cow. Trump is at 19.8. So he's leading Trump by some 40 points. Yikes. Joe Biden, look, he got up to 5.9%. Okay, Biden is cooking now. He's almost a whopping 6%, and other undecided is about 16% on that poll. And Rick, if you wouldn't mind dropping a link in the chat so that our Maverick family can try to vote. If you
Sure.
Hopefully Twitter will count your vote. The poll's been doing strange things today because it froze up again. Some people sent me screenshots this morning saying that their vote wasn't being counted and that the counter was frozen again at like 730 votes. And now I notice it's starting to count votes again. Now we're up to 776 votes. But we need a lot more votes. And I want to make sure that it's a fair poll and that Trump supporters get included too, that Biden supporters get included. I'm not trying to skew this to favor my guy, Bobby Kennedy.
Yes, you are. You love him.
Well, I am happy with the results so far, but I'm really making an effort, to reach out to, especially to Trump voters, because what I see in the fall is a likely matchup between Kennedy and Trump, right? Which would be a hell of an interesting race. I hope that that's what we get in the fall of 2024. And a lot of MAGA people agree with me. They would much rather see Bobby Kennedy as the Democratic nominee than Joe Biden. And I kind of wonder for a minute why, because wouldn't Biden be so much easier to beat for Donald Trump? Are you real sure that Kennedy's going to be an easy one for Donald Trump to beat? I don't know about that. But a MAGA friend today, Rick, you'll love this. A MAGA friend told me that they said, I want Bobby to be the Democratic nominee just so the mainstream media will shill for Trump in the fall. I thought that was pretty damn funny.
I have to say, like, the mainstream media is calling him a long shot, but I think RFK Jr., I can see a path to victory.
Well, they said Trump was a long shot once upon a time.
That's right.
Remember?
I absolutely see a path to victory. You've got him going up against, Biden's, the incumbent, right? So there's an assumption that he's going to be the nominee to some degree, but he's old, getting older. We still have quite a ways to go before we get to a decision on who the nominee will be. And
unpopular too.
Yeah,
by the
that's
looks
right.
Of that poll.
And when left up to the people, I think that RFK will run away with the popular support. And so there's going to be serious pressure on Biden. And I think because Biden is the presumed nominee, a lot of people won't run. So some of the more serious opposition that might have come forward won't materialize. That's going to create probably kind of a two-way race between RFK and Biden. And then it's hands down who you're going to pick, as far as I'm concerned, if Biden even makes it that far. So then if he becomes the nominee, you've got one heck of a race on your hands with Trump. But this time around, Trump has baggage. Trump is, I don't think his campaign is as slick and it isn't firing on all the cylinders the way it was the very first time he got elected. It's a different ball game altogether. And because they appeal to voters on a similar plane, because their issues kind of overlap, and I think RFK has more credibility on some of these portfolios. He'll pull some support away from the MAGA movement to him, and he'll still get all the Democrats. And then I see him kind of walking away with it if it gets that far. So that's the path to victory that I sort of see. I mean, honestly, as passionate as those MAGA people are for Trump, there's a certain religion almost behind the MAGA movement, right? Yeah. But that will get eroded with RFK.
I think he's winning a lot of Trump people over.
Yeah, I think he's the only candidate that can do that.
Oh, certainly. No Democrat's going to have any luck with the MAGA movement because Democrats are too busy demonizing Trump supporters all the way back to the days of Hillary Clinton, calling them deplorable.
And remember when we talked about Tulsi Gabbard as a running mate? If you combine those two,
please.
it's a no lose ticket as far as I'm concerned.
Damn, that's my dream ticket, Rick. Could I dare to dream such things?
That is a winner, man.
But then Tulsi'd have to go back to the Democratic Party after she made this big show of leaving and Dem exit and all that.
Yeah.
How humiliating would it be to go back to the Democratic Party?
Maybe not so humiliating because, you've got a guy in there who's really kind of sort of trying to reclaim the party, or in his words, save it. Right.
And she could rebrand herself as a Kennedy Democrat because she really always was a Kennedy Democrat.
Mm-hmm.
Tulsi's a big fan of JFK.
So
big fan of the Kennedys. She's a Kennedy Democrat.
No shame in that. No losing face. Not for that.
I don't think so. I don't know how she'd feel about it, but I don't see any shame in that game whatsoever. And I think she'd be the perfect complement to Bobby Kennedy. And she's still so young and got the rest of her career ahead of her in politics. I've always seen a very bright future for her. If she were vice president, she'd be a shoo-in for the White House next time.
Yeah. 8 years later, then she's prez.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love the sound of that.
Wouldn't that be
something? I've always wanted a female president. I'm a woman, but I didn't want it to be Hillary Clinton. And I sure as hell don't want it to be Kamala Harris. But Tulsi Gabbard, I'd be real happy if she was the first female president of the United States.
She's just so level-headed,
Yeah. And uniquely qualified because of all of her military experience, her congressional experience. She's got experience in she ticks all the right boxes in terms of experience. In that sense, arguably she should be at the top of the ticket with Kennedy because she's got a lot more experience at these things than even he does. He's never held elected office, never served in the military, but you put that combined experience together, that's a really strong ticket. Strong president and vice president. I see a strong administration.
And I would sleep better at night because I wouldn't be so worried about dying in a fiery nuclear inferno in my sleep.
Yes. Yes. And, even if she doesn't run as the vice president, if she doesn't want to forge a political alliance or come back to the Democratic Party, I'm sure she'll play some kind of a role, an important role in a Kennedy administration, Secretary of State, maybe Secretary of Defense. I think Tulsi'd be a terrific Secretary of Defense. So would Scott Ritter.
Well, now that would be something.
I'm just going to throw that out there. If Bobby's listening. Please consider that. But I'm sure she'll have some role to play.
Politically, though, you couldn't go wrong with Tulsi Gabbard. She checks all the boxes.
In whatever job she wants, she can have it. Tulsi, you're hired,
Yeah.
I don't make hiring decisions for the campaign, by the way, but
a good friend of mine she's been a MAGA person, or was, especially in the early going. And when she was listening to Tulsi Gabbard speak, when she was running to get the Democratic nomination to run for president, my friend said, she's confusing me. She's confusing me. I don't understand. Good way. Yeah, it's like she's a Democrat, though, right?
She can't be a Democrat. She was like the last sane Democrat, and that's why she had to leave that damn party because they're all nuts.
Yeah.
It's the biggest concern that, is that your chair?
It is this chair. It keeps on a little thing. Every once in a while, just let's go. And then I and then people are like, are you okay in the chat?
I'm just going to see 2 feet sticking up here.
That's right. A little entertainment.
For those of you out there listening, going, what the hell was that on the podcast? I can't see. Is he all right? Yeah, he's okay. I forgot what I was going to say. What the hell was I going to say? My only real complaint is that Bobby's running as a Democrat. I get it. I understand why he feels he needs to do that, why it might be good strategy. Jury's still out on that one with me, but I respect his choice. I'm going to support him as a Democrat. Wish him all the best of luck. But I'm already looking forward to after the convention, because if things don't go as planned, they're going to Bernie him at the convention. They're going to hand him his hat. And then what happens? Then what happens? Because that's the moment he's going to show us what he's really made of. Is he going to be a Bernie Sanders? And like all the others, the failed candidates who just did the thing and endorsed the nominee, because that's the party rules. You must endorse the nominee. You don't have a choice. So is he going to do that? Is he going to, Joe Biden's an old family friend of the Kennedys, so you would expect him to fall in line, be a good Democrat, and endorse Joe Biden and go out and campaign for Joe Biden in the fall. Now, if Bobby does that, he's going to lose me. I can't, no. I'm not a partisan. I'm not a Democrat. I haven't been a Democrat in 27 years. I'm only going to vote Democrat this one time for him. There's no way that I could support that. So I hope, and I know I'm not alone, because I heard Kim Iverson say this the other day on her show, and I know some others out there agree with me, that if in fact the DNC screws him over, I hope he just says, well, then to heck with you, and he does what Tulsi did, leaves that damn party and does one of two things: strikes out as an independent and runs independent, maybe with Tulsi Gabbard, right? Then they could run together.
Wow.
That would be powerful.
To win with that would be like a first, and I can see that being possible.
Yeah, I can too, especially if it's Biden versus Trump. There's a big wide lane right there in the middle that Americans want. 60% or better of Americans are crying for an independent choice. So I hope that he would consider that to keep his integrity intact. He's going to lose all respect from so many people if he just endorses Joe Biden and goes out and campaigns for him in the fall. The other option is what Roger Stone has in mind, and that's to team up with Trump, join the Republican Party, and be Trump's VP. What do you think of that idea?
I don't see that happening.
Do you think that Trump wouldn't offer, or Bobby wouldn't accept?
I don't think either. I don't think it would. Both. I just don't see either one of them entertaining it, and I don't think
incompatible.
I don't think they would work well together.
I think that's a great observation, Rick. Yeah, you know people, and they're just very different types of people.
Yeah,
because they seem like oil and water to me.
Yeah, he wouldn't just be Trump's yes man. He just couldn't do it.
Exactly. Trump does like yes men.
Yeah,
and that's not Bobby.
Right.
Yeah, and Trump doesn't like to be challenged either. What would he do? Fire his vice president one day? He doesn't like something that Bobby says, you're fired.
Yeah,
Trump would probably do that.
Yeah, I don't think I couldn't work for Donald Trump. I'd be there for like a day, and then I'd be like, F you.
Right.
You don't talk to me like that.
I'd split after he screwed me on my paycheck. He has got a habit of not paying people.
I liked you until I worked for you.
Yeah.
Now right? I can't stand you.
You really are as awful as they said.
It's always different. The relationship always changes when you go to work for somebody.
No kidding. Yeah, it's ruined some good friendships.
Yes, it certainly has.
And family, family relationships too. Never work for your family.
That's right.
Yeah, that can get ugly.
Yep, I've had that happen a couple of times, where I've gone to work for people that I shouldn't have gone to work for because
Yeah.
Same with like business partners, right?
Yes.
You have to be careful about that stuff too. You want to ruin a friendship? Go into business together.
That's kind of the cool thing, though, about you and me, Walker. We get along. We're friends. We work together. It seems to work out well. We haven't had a knockdown drag out yet.
No, not really. I
want me to
you know,
start
I
one?
I am exaggerating because like a friend of mine who I was in business with, he stopped by here the other day. We're still good friends. So I am
After the pandemic,
exaggerating.
maybe some of those broken friendships can finally mend. You
Yeah.
know, people that we lost during the pandemic over this stupid argument about COVID, about
Oh yeah.
masks, about vaccines, about all of these issues that have been used to divide us. I hope now that COVID is calming down that we can heal those relationships. I don't know if you've had any luck with that yet. But it seems like the other side, the pro vaccine, pro mask people, now they're pretending it never happened. They're just like, oh, everything's back to normal. Hi, good to see you.
Right.
Look, Ma, no mask. And they don't mention it and they don't
Yep.
want to talk about it.
Right.
They just want to move on. They don't want to revisit that.
Yeah, I have to. I go to a place of business. I won't say where because I don't want the person to know I'm talking about them. But this lady, and I go in there, and you know, she's behind the counter, and she was like all in on the masks, and I'm so glad now that I just kept my mouth shut. And a couple of times, you know, because like I'd go in, I didn't have a mask on, right? And
Did she give you a hard time?
Wearing a mask today? You're not wearing a mask? I'm like, no, I'm not. Nope. But I never engaged, right? And she wouldn't really engage with me, but I knew she was steaming, and that made me steam. And then I was like, okay, just shut up. And I'm glad that I did because we've been friends for a long time, and now things are just, you know, very much back to normal. And even then, we were still, you know, friendly, but it was a wedge issue.
Right.
Yeah.
And isn't it funny how the people who were all pro mask, all of a sudden, I mean, COVID's still around, but now they just don't worry about it and go without a mask like you did all along. But they're not about to admit that you might have been right and that they might have been wrong.
You know what? I went to the grocery store today. And the reason I went to the grocery store I went to is because that grocery store honored mask exemptions, which were written right into the laws here.
Yeah.
And they were supposed to honor it. It was one of the
It
very
was
few
rare in
places.
Canada that they did.
Yes.
Yes.
Very hard to find a place that honored the mask exemptions. And so that's where I still go now. I will shop there consistently, and I have been because of what they did during the lockdowns.
Exactly. Those are the businesses that we should be giving our support to.
That's right.
You know, those who did defy the stupid so-called science that wasn't based on science at all.
Yeah. And there are businesses that there are businesses I will never, ever, ever go into again as long as I live.
Right. Me too. If they were really Nazi about the masks, no.
Sorry.
They never respected personal choice. Why would I want to give them my business?
Exactly right.
I'm too libertarian for that.
Yeah.
I'm that libertarian.
That's where I'm at with that, man. And I'm pretty strict about it. You know, even, you know, some of the big box stores I have to go into once in a while, but I don't give them my preference. They're like last choice. If I can go someplace else, I'll go there first, including the Walmart, you know, here in town, because they were all in on the masks too.
Oh yeah. You know, Walmart still makes their employees wear masks, even outdoors. Like when you go do the grocery pickup.
Yeah.
They still have to wear masks outdoors.
Because I wasn't good enough to be allowed to go into their store. You know, back then, I had to go for curbside pickup, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Like, okay, well, now you want me back? Well, I've got issues.
Speaking of issues, I've got one more thing to say, and then I have to hop off for the night. But I wanted to compliment you on the interview you did yesterday with Paul Hartman.
Oh yes, yeah.
Damn, that was good. That was so great. I always loved the Hartman brothers. Didn't know much about Paul. Of course, knew about John. I guess he was the oldest brother, and Phil. I loved Phil, and it was really cool to hear his stories. Nice to see Mouth of the South I guess they're old friends, right? They kind of know each other, or yeah, through the 420 movement. And I know you probably couldn't ask him about this because you were on YouTube yesterday, but after Phil Hartman died and Bryn killed herself, the family of the executors of the estate, I think it was both sides of the family, brought a lawsuit against Pfizer.
Yeah.
Because Pfizer was the maker of that drug, Zoloft.
Yep.
And remember, this was 1998. Not much was known about Zoloft back then. We didn't know yet. It was still a pretty experimental drug.
Yeah.
Sound familiar? It was an experimental drug that we really didn't understand what the effects would be, say, if mixed with alcohol. Because I think Bryn had a couple of drinks that night. Not a lot, but just a couple of drinks mixed with Zoloft can make you go, woohoo. I've always believed that Zoloft killed Phil Hartman, and killed Bryn Hartman too. I think that drug bore a lot of the blame. So they did sue Pfizer unsuccessfully about a year later in a wrongful death action.
I was aware of it, and I pushed over into that zone, and he just chose not to.
Oh, did you? There. I may have stepped out of the room. I missed that part.
Yeah. I started to talk about that, and so I left it open for him. But because of the sensitive nature, right? And it isn't like it's new information that I was going to be,
very old information,
revealing the newest information on this, developing story. No, I mean there's a lot of history
people
there.
Sort of remember if you were around 25 years ago, and that was a long damn time ago. But I remember that case, and at the time, I hardly even knew who Pfizer was. But Pfizer's become a household word in the last 3 years. Everybody knows who Pfizer is now, right?
That's right.
And so that was just one of those little interesting side roads of that story yesterday. I just wanted to remind people that the drug involved that may have made Bryn Hartman lose her mind that night and do what she did was made by Pfizer.
Well, I know that there is, a lot of controversy surrounding that. I know that there is research being done. People have been looking at the statistics surrounding the use of antidepressants like Zoloft and shootings, especially with younger people.
And another thing that happened that same year, like they were just a month apart, was the Columbine shooting, right? Or was that 98 or 99? Columbine.
I'm not sure.
Those kids were also on Zoloft. And it was only then, after the Hartman incident and the Columbine incident, that we finally started to have a bit of a national conversation about the potential, psychosomatic effects of these drugs that could make people suicidal, could make them homicidal. But no, there was hardly no discussion about it back then.
Yeah. And I mean, for legal purposes here, we have to say that we're speculating. We're not drawing conclusions and saying that Pfizer is absolutely responsible for these things. But there's been a lot of discussion around it.
A lot of anecdotal evidence. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
A lot of stories out there. And it does stand to reason in a lot of these cases. But back then, the courts were not willing to award the family any damages. I don't recall how that case settled, if it was settled out of court or if it was dropped or what the ultimate resolution was. I couldn't find anything on how it was resolved yesterday. Got me curious. I went back to the archives and went, it was the Pfizer angle that got me curious about the whole thing. Then once I realized, oh yes, I was like, who made Zoloft? And then it hit me. Oh, Pfizer made Zoloft. Still does.
And there's still some litigation out there surrounding all of that with Pfizer, as I understand it. So it's an ongoing issue for sure.
Right. And when he was talking about the time he served in prison, I think he got a 6-year sentence, served half of that.
Yeah.
And I thought, for nonviolent marijuana offense, right? And I thought to myself of all the people like him who back in the day did long prison sentences, even though they were nonviolent criminals who were growing marijuana. And I think of all the big pharma executives who still walk free and are allowed to make billions of dollars and have probably got the blood of millions on their hands. Just doesn't
That
seem
reminds
right.
me of Mark Emery, who I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he was has been a big marijuana activist over the years. He was in my hometown where I grew up and where I went to journalism school and so on. And I went down to his used bookstore at one point to interview him because he had been arrested and he spent a little bit of time in jail at that point. And I interviewed him, and it was, I mean, even that was chilling for me because he told me on camera at the time about his experience of having to use the toilet like out in the open with all the other people in the jail, right? And he said he didn't think he could ever do it, but he did. And I thought, I never want to have to go to jail ever. No.
If you weren't already risk averse, right? You're pretty
That's
risk
right. No,
averse.
that's it. No, I'm going to be good.
You're going to be a really good boy after that.
I'm never going to do that.
Yeah, I hear you, man. I've never been to jail, not for lack of trying, by the way. I mean, I've definitely done some dumb things that probably should have landed me in jail, but I was just one of the lucky ones who didn't get caught. But you know,
well, here's the irony. Okay, I've been very straight and narrow. You know, I covered the Queen. I had to do all the security checks and all that, and everything.
Got to be clean as the whistle,
color, right? I crossed the border one time with anyway, and they confiscated my phone. They gave me like the full
Third
search,
degree.
right? And they were like, okay, this guy's clean. I mean, it's like, if you want to know if I'm a bad guy, just know I'm very clean until now, because now I'm on here with, communists, and socialists and libertarians and
Russians.
And now we're talking about the Ruhu movement. And
we're all going to jail, man.
Yeah, if I cross the border now, boy, I'm going to jail just because of this. And I have to tell you something, you better be careful too, because you're talking to me. And now you're in deep trouble.
I keep bad company. Man, I do. I've got some dangerous friends. We're all going to prison. It's just a matter of time. I hope they can build enough prisons for all of us, because I want to be, in the same cell block as you. We could do Maverick News from prison.
Well, just we just need like adjacent cells, so like through the bars we can play cards or something.
I can't believe we're laughing about this.
Yeah, I know. To be quite honest, I'm actually worried about crossing the border now that we've done this show tonight.
Well, I don't blame you. I'm worried about trying to fly anywhere or to try and leave the country. What's going to happen next time I travel? After the, really, edgy journalism I've done over the past year, I've pissed off all the right people. I'm probably on every national security list. Are they even going to let me get on a plane? Can I go see my grandma in Dallas? Or am I going to have to drive? I mean,
I don't know.
I'm probably on some no-fly list. I haven't tried because I like flying, but I hate flying commercial with all the crazy people. And the little kids and the guy next to you with the smelly feet who kicks his shoes off and props his feet up on the seat back. So many reasons I hate flying. Get me in a private aircraft and I'm happy. Some little puddle jumper. I love flying in those things.
Yeah.
But no, I hate flying commercial.
I just watched Top Gun Maverick for the first time 2 nights ago. Have you seen that
first time?
Yeah.
Oh, the new one.
The new one.
Okay, I thought you were saying, how could you have missed Top Gun? Are you the last guy on Earth? You're the Maverick guy. Yeah. No, I haven't actually seen the sequel. What did you think of it?
It was okay. Not as good as everyone was saying. I thought the script was a little bit formulaic. It was just kind of like, okay, they just kind of tie everything together, but really the script, it was like predictable, totally predictable. The flying sequences were
I'm
good,
sure those were cool.
really good. So great cinematography, but not as good as I was expecting it to be. It was a bit of a cliche, but you know what? That works. That's why it was what it was. That's why it works. So I have to just kind of go, well, okay, it was just entertainment and
Which,
propaganda.
maybe is kind of nice. If it wasn't woke, it wasn't pushing some agenda on you. It was just a great way to spend a couple hours and be entertained.
Yeah. And you know what? It had like the one female fighter pilot. I thought when I first saw the movie come out in the trailers, I thought they had several, like almost half of them were like, but no, it was only one. And I thought, well, I guess that's sort of representative of what's going on in the military right now. So I guess I could appreciate it because it was demographically probably realistic. And so I appreciated that. They weren't trying to push it too far. Yeah. Remember the old series Battlestar Galactica from
yeah, sure, I do.
Yeah. And see, even there back then, they got that whole squadron of female Viper pilots, right? I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah,
that was back in the 70s. And then Richard Hatch. Yeah. Richard Hatch. There was the episode where his wife, played by, what was her name? Suzanne. Was it Suzanne?
Suzanne Plachette?
I loved her. Yeah, she was great. And they had the whole conversation about it was like my mom and my dad back in the 70s. My mom wanted to go to work, and my dad was like, "I don't want you to go to work. I'm the man of the house." And then my mom ended up going and getting a job, and she worked, and then my mom worked there for about a year, and it just reminded me of that whole. And she said, "So do you want me to quit?" And my dad said, "No, never," because everything was working out great. So he changed his mind. Right. So, but it reminded me so much of that episode of Battlestar Galactica. But even back then, like they were really trying to, like, there was that back then, there were no fighter pilots in the military. So absolutely social engineering back then, which, as a kid, it didn't bother me at all. It was pretty woke for the time, but didn't bother me. I just appreciated
the original Top Gun. Was it 1986 when the first Top Gun came out? Yeah. The Kelly Gillis character.
Right.
If you remember back then, I mean, women were starting to, make some waves in the military, but still, that was pretty big deal at the time. It was a big women's empowerment issue.
Right. Because she was such an important character. Like a consultant.
She was the boss.
Kelly McGillis. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess today they would consider that woke, but at the time it seemed like a great leap forward for us women. I remember looking up to her character at the time. I think I was just starting my first year of college, and her character made me feel like, see, anything's possible for us girls, right? We can do whatever we want. The sky's the limit. Literally.
Yeah.
Then we hit the glass ceiling and it's like, oh, no, you can't.
But, they fought an enemy that they never actually identified. So you don't know what country it was that they were fighting with.
Right.
So I'm not sure why. Probably just to give it shelf life. If they had picked a particular country as an enemy, it might have dated it. Right. And, and given that that movie's release was delayed, it's probably best that they didn't do that anyway. Plus, it'll age better without that, I suppose.
Yeah, it's timeless now. I mean, it still has kind of a Cold War feel to it when you go back and you watch the original Maverick, Top Gun. But
made me feel really old because
I bet it did.
In the movie, and it's not a spoiler alert because everybody's seen it already, but Tom Cruise and his sidekick, they end up stealing an F-14 Tomcat from the enemy.
Oh,
and they're like, this thing is so old, and it's like, these are the jets that they flew in the original
movie. Original 30 years ago.
And then he goes up and he's flying this old dilapidated half half broken, rusty old bucket of bolts F-14. And he goes up against a 5th-generation warfare fighter jet, right? With all the bells and whistles that, can blow away the most modern jets, 10-1. And of course the line is, it's not the plane, it's the pilot.
Of course.
Don't think, just do.
Watch what I can do with this old bucket of bolts.
That's
Watch
right.
me.
And he survives, and the two of those 5th-generation fighters taken out.
Awesome.
Yeah.
He's like, hold my beer. Let me show you what I can do with this old F-14.
This old bucket.
Hold my beer and watch this.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, me too. I thought it was pretty cool.
I need to see that movie. And the folks who have seen it, they told me, okay, yeah, it's not as good as the original. I mean, how do you top Top Gun? But, they said that what they liked about it was that it was, for a change, something kind of wholesome, something kind of all-American coming out of Hollywood without a particular woke agenda or a political agenda that they were trying to push on you, that it was just good entertainment. And that in itself was the refreshing part. That was the best part.
You know what it was? They started making that movie when Trump was still in office.
That's right. And then COVID happened, right? And shut it down.
Yeah. So I think that's partly what it was about. It was supposed to be, that rekindling of the Reagan-esque American spirit.
That's it. Make America great again.
That's right. That's what it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
Partly.
And then the movie didn't come out until after Trump was out of office. Yeah. Because of the COVID pandemic. It probably, I think it was supposed to be out in at least a year earlier.
Yeah.
And then COVID happened and shut the whole world down. And ironically, Trump did that.
As Rush Limbaugh said several times, I heard him say, imagine what this presidency could have been. Referring to Donald Trump when Rush was still alive. And I would listen to him on the radio from time to time. And I mean, he was right, because the Democrats were just so relentless with their attacks. The lawfare, the Russia, all of the spying, all of the crap, And he said, imagine what this presidency could have been if they had embraced that pro-American, pro-peace, pro-growth agenda. If he had been allowed to just pursue that and just restore the economy and work on all of those things and give people back that American pride that they had back when Reagan was president, it could have been a much for maybe for real, maybe a facade, maybe an illusion, but sure would have made people feel better.
That's right.
Yeah.
Maybe it was an illusion. We lived through the Reagan years, and as an American growing up in those times, it was hard not to feel the patriotism in the air. And everybody flew an American flag and had an American bumper sticker on their car, American T-shirts, and Bruce Springsteen's "Born in the USA" blaring out of every stereo. It was a great time to be an American. I still think of it as our last great decade, right? And when Trump said he wanted to make America great again, I thought he wanted to rewind, back to about the 80s.
Yep.
If we were going to set the clock back, let's set the Back to the Future mobile to 1985.
Of
course. A pretty good year.
Yeah. Of course, me too. And of course, Donald Trump wants to go back to that era because he was flying high. I think that was when he was at his peak, really.
Yep. The 80s. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
That's when he was the hottest thing going.
And I watch videos of him from the 80s, and he was sharper. He was sharp.
He was impressive back then.
Yeah.
That's why everybody was bugging him to run for president. Even then, I think Roger Stone started trying to talk him into it back around 1988. I think he wanted him to challenge Vice President Bush. And Trump wasn't ready, but he was 35. He was old enough to, and Roger Stone, even then, Roger Stone was trying to get him to run. And Trump, really, I think he was really trying to bring back that Reagan-esque era And I went to Trump rallies, and it was the closest thing I could feel again, like stepping in that time machine and going back to the Reagan era. And it was nice. Just so much patriotism, love of country, nice people, wholesome, family friendly gatherings. Trump rallies are. They're really a lot of fun. I enjoyed them very much in the 2016 year. I didn't attend any in 2020 because I was too sick. I had long COVID and couldn't go. But, he tried really hard to bring that back, and yet it didn't happen in the way that it did in the Reagan era. And I think the reason is because Reagan never had the kind of opposition, fierce, violent, angry opposition that Trump had. Our country just wasn't that divided under Ronald Reagan, and he always won by a pretty good margin. So he was picking up Democrats to vote for him as well in every election. A lot of Democrats liked him. There were Reagan Democrats. Remember them? You didn't hear of too many Trump Democrats, though. That line was a hard line, and it just couldn't be crossed in this deeply partisan, divided society we have now.
As you know, as much as we had serious issues back then, that there was not the polarization that we have now. And I would put it out there that there's almost it's not almost, there is like a mania, if not mental illness in some cases.
It's a mental illness. Come on. Trump derangement syndrome. That's a thing.
There's that, but there's also, on the other side too, like there's a mania, in certain departments or areas of the freedom movement, the MAGA movement, that there are people out there that are kind of like a little bit on the fringe. And I don't mean that in the same sense as Trudeau does. I just mean like the QAnon group, like some of those folks, I think they do go down rabbit holes that take them into pretty dark places that maybe aren't that real.
That's what worries me sometimes about Trump, though, especially like the last couple of years. He seems to have gone to, I can't tell if he's trying to placate the Q people and just keep them on board because he needs their votes and their support, or if he really believes some of this stuff from the QAnon movement. But he's always retweeting QAnon accounts on Truth Social. And some of it's kind of wacky. And it makes me question Trump's judgment, because surely you don't believe that stuff, do you? I mean, are you okay, Mr. Trump? That when I see that, it does make me wonder if he's ready for 4 more years or 8 more years holding that kind of power. I mean, I don't have a problem with him believing it as a private citizen. I don't think I'd want a president who's a QAnon person, though.
No.
No,
because the biggest problem is? It's like I get people calling me or sending me messages telling me that Donald Trump is actually still the president, and he's actually even in charge of Canada.
Oh, and the problem
the problem is that if he actually believes in all the QAnon stuff, then he thinks he's still the president and in charge of Canada, which is like really a problem.
That would be a major problem. What if he's like delusional and thinks he's king of the world?
And what if he believes that there's more than one of himself?
Yeah.
Like if he believes there are like 3 or 4 or 5 Trumps, how would he even know which one of those is him?
Oh, my head hurts. My head hurts.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, think about that. What a rabbit hole. I mean,
right?
That's a deep rabbit hole, Rick Walker.
Oh. There are 5 of me. I don't know which one I am today. Which Trump do I identify as? Wait a minute, that's woke. I can't go there. What am I going? Right? This is a big problem.
And there's so many different versions of the QAnon story. Like the QAnon people can't even get their own story straight because some of the Q people think that Trump is still the president, and some of them think that he's running Canada too, and that Biden is a body double and he's an actor and it's all a game. And then others tell me that Trump is dead. And that he's been dead for quite some time now.
And for Trump, as a QAnon subscriber, that is a real problem, because then he thinks he's dead.
He not only sees dead people, right? He is dead people. And he's running for president. Elect the dead guy. Vote for the dead guy in 2024. It can't be any worse than Joe Biden.
And the really scary thing is that this conversation probably is not just a conspiracy. It probably is reality. We're screwed.
Everyone seems to have a different definition of reality these days. That's what scares me, is we can't agree on what's real anymore.
Yep. It's true.
That scares the hell out of me. And probably you too, because we both spent our whole lives in the news business, where we thought it was our job to inform people every night on the news what's going on.
Yep.
And nobody even believes the news anymore. Not even the independent media, right? If you can't trust us, who can you trust?
You've seen me on here where this is the reality. This is the reality. I run clips of people saying things that are not very good, bad, sometimes bad things. They say it. I run the clip of them saying it, and then people accuse me of lying about them saying what they said when I showed them saying it.
Yes, I just played it. And they're like, no, he didn't say that. I've had to deal with some of that this week. People that are totally disconnected from reality. In the when Bobby Kennedy made his speech Wednesday, and he hit Trump on the lockdowns, right? And he blamed Trump for locking down the country.
Right.
Said it was Trump's bad judgment that he got rolled by Dr. Fauci, and he got rolled by these crooks in his administration. And he did. But there were people who were trying to start arguments with me about it online, who I presume are kind of the QAnon wing of the Trump faction. And they were like, that's not true. That's not true. Trump didn't lock down the country. And I'm like, okay, how could anybody's memory be that short? It was only 3 years ago. It was 3 years ago last month. Doesn't everybody remember who was president during the lockdowns of 2020? Who gave the order?
Some people would argue that he left it up to the individual states, but
well, he did, but he shut down the federal government.
Right. But right. He's still the president. He still had a lot of power, and he could have stopped all of that.
Well, basically, when he announced that we were closed for business on March 15th, 2020, he didn't have the power to boss the states around. But when he said we're closed, and he explained why, states just did it because the president said so. And I don't know if that was the right thing. And then some of the red states were the first to wake up, like Oklahoma. We were the second state in the country to open back up. We opened up at the end of May 2020 because we had a governor who just said, oh, this is crazy. Let's get back to work. But and by that time, Trump was starting to, reverse course. And he was saying we need to open back up, liberate Michigan, etc. But yeah, he did put us there. He put us there.
When I think back, though, even here in Canada, if you're the prime minister or the president or a governor or
what would you do?
Right. And so you're kind of screwed, right? Because not conspiracies aside, and let's just say that you're just trying to deal with this as a genuine leader and a real human being. And you're presented with this scenario. and you have all your advisors around you for whatever reason, maybe legitimate or maybe corrupt, but they're, you've got doctors, medical officers of health, the CDC, and they're all saying, lock down, put people in masks, do all this stuff. So you have all these medical professionals advising you to do this. And if it takes somebody with gigantic cojones to stand up to that at that point and say, nope, not going to do it. Not going to do all that stuff. Because if you're wrong and they're right, you're going to get strung up because
get
all
impeached.
these people die.
Yep.
All these people would die. And so you're in a no-win scenario, right? You're in a no-win scenario.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Trump was damned if he did and damned if he didn't.
They all
Plus, half
were.
the country already hated him anyway. Remember, he was being impeached when the coronavirus pandemic started. Those impeachment hearings started in late January, were ongoing all through February. So he had these two crises going on at the exact same time. Two of the biggest crises of any president's term of office is to be impeached. Then you throw in a worldwide pandemic, some novel virus on top of that. And it's an election year. I mean, he really had his work cut out for him in 2020. And I feel for him there. I do. I wouldn't want to be the president through those times of crisis. And that's what defines a presidency, though. That's right. It is crises. It's not the good times that define a great president. It's the bad times. It's the crisis.
So as much as you're stuck between a rock and a hard place, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. You just better make the right damn decision, period. And there's no forgiveness. Because you're the president. You just need to get it right. And I don't know that he did. And I certainly
have mixed feelings about that to this day.
Yeah.
I feel like if I were in his shoes and I saw this killer virus coming out of China and out of Europe that was just knocking down perfectly young, healthy people. Remember, that first wave of COVID was so strong and deadly. It was the deadliest wave ever. Now COVID is weakened to the point where it really only affects adversely the immune compromised, the elderly, the people with pre-existing conditions. But that wasn't the case. Back in early 2020, we saw young, healthy doctors dropping dead in the hospitals in Wuhan. This stuff was strong. Now, if I was the president and I saw that coming, and all my health advisors, a guy like Fauci, who'd been there for 40 years, I'd be like, well, this guy must know what he's talking about, right? I mean, I could have made that same mistake. Anybody could have made that same mistake to take the advice of the people who were supposed to know their business.
Yeah.
Trump was obviously not aware of Fauci's history and some of the really bad things he had done prior to COVID. He did what I think if it had been Biden in office, he would have done the same thing. Of course he would have. He probably locked us down even harder than Trump did. And he would have kept us locked down. But I will give Trump some credit for this. And I really like this. His COVID pandemic response. He did some really great things for the working class, for the poor, for the small businesses that were closed during those lockdowns. Even though he imposed the lockdowns, he gave us more government help and aid and compensation to get through that crisis than Joe Biden probably ever would have if he'd been the president. And he's supposed to be the commie, the socialist who's going to give you all this free stuff. It was Trump who gave you the free stuff during the pandemic. He was further to the left than Joe Biden. It was Trump who gave you the stimulus checks. It was Trump who gave you temporary Medicare. Which paid for your COVID treatments, for your testing. If you had to be hospitalized, it paid for all that. I know because I had to go through it. He gave us plus up on food stamps. Joe Biden just repealed that plus up on food stamps. The eviction moratorium, which was later struck down by the Supreme Court on Biden's watch, that was started under Trump. He did the eviction moratorium executive order so that people wouldn't lose their homes or get evicted while they had no income and no job and everything's closed. I mean, what else are you supposed to do? And the, what were they called? The PPP loans, the Paycheck Protection Program for small businesses. Granted, it wasn't perfect. In fact, that was a deeply flawed program, but at least it was an attempt to help somehow. So I have to give him a lot of credit for the good things that he tried to do during that unprecedented crisis. No president in history had ever faced anything like it. And there was no blueprint. There was no instruction manual of what to do. And as Bobby Kennedy argued the other day in that speech, his argument was maybe we should have done none of the above. You know, he said the founders were well aware. We had the smallpox epidemic back then. We had pandemics back then that were very dangerous, very virulent. And there was no pandemic exception to the Constitution. That's his argument, which is a very libertarian argument, actually.
Absolutely. That's what I was saying from the beginning.
That's what libertarians been saying.
I was like, wait a minute. You guys have these emergency response plans. They're in binders. You just go over to the shelf and pull it off and do that. And that's what you always, and they ignored it. They just ignored that stuff and did this instead. That to me just blew my mind. So
me too.
That's why I really am not as tolerant of the government response overall.
Well, and Canada screwed it up even worse, even worse than we did.
Yes.
You guys locked down hard, and how long was Canada locked down, basically?
Oh, I don't know, man.
It was a year, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Like more than a year? Because you guys were still locked down when the Freedom Convoy was going on, right? They hadn't.
Yep.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
That was much longer than we were in the States.
Yeah, it was just because of the convoy, and then
there's that convoy.
Because of that. That's no question. Yeah.
Totally. That's why I'll always thank you guys for what you did to open the eyes of the world.
Yeah.
That it was time to lift the lockdowns, time to come back down to earth, get back to work, try to get our lives back to some semblance of normal, and without forcing us to take an experimental drug. Period. I won't say any more because we're on YouTube.
Yes.
I got to go anyway. But
yeah.
What a lovely conversation. It's always great to talk with you.
It's a pleasure every time.
Thanks,
you,
Walker. Happy Sunday. Yeah. Happy Sunday, Mavericks. Enjoy your night. Take care, and I will see you guys very soon.
All right. Great show. Thank you so much. And thanks for bringing Caleb back.
Isn't he just awesome?
That was a good show.
He's the best communist I know. Love that guy.
And isn't there some irony in there where we are talking to a communist about trying to make the United States live up to its billing as a free country and honoring free speech?
And when you watch those guys protesting out in front of the White House, I don't know about you, Rick, but I couldn't find one word that they said that I disagreed with.
Yeah. Well,
we may disagree on economics, but everything else, honestly, I'm with you guys.
Yes, that's right. Me too. You know what? So
we live in an upside down world. Okay, the communists are the good guys now.
That's weird.
But they tell us the fascists are the good guys and the commies are the bad guys. Yeah. Might just be the other way around. You think?
It appears to be the case. Yes. He's. I enjoy having him here. I like the conversations, and free speech. Just one more thing that we absolutely have, in common. So
it's opposite world. Remember opposite world?
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Get back to doing opposite world, Walker.
That's right.
Here we are. We're living in it every single day.
Yes, we are.
So I will say good mornings instead of good night because it's opposite world.
Okay. All right. You have a good one. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Walker. Bye-bye now.
See ya. Bye.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.